I'll call this meeting to order. We will go ahead and start with the Citizens Forum. Persons desiring to address the council must limit their presentation to no more than 2 minutes unless an item is posted on the agenda. The Texas Open Meetings Act prohibits the council from responding to any comments other than to refer the matter to a future agenda, to an existing policy, or to a staff person with special factual information. Claims against the city council members or employees, as well as any individual personnel appeal, are not appropriate for Citizens Forum. If necessary, the City Council may convene into executive session under Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code regarding any items on this agenda. Citizens Forum is now open. Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3. Receive presentation from Samco Capital Markets, the city financial advisor, and P3 Works, the city's PID administrator, regarding Public Improvement District PID financing and other matters relating thereto. I'll just ask to the audience. I know we're doing a formalized council and P&Z workshop. If we have any questions, we'd like to limit it to afterwards, after the actual session is over. I know our speakers will be with us for a little bit afterwards too, and there's a lot of people that have worked really hard and want to or have been curious for quite some time. Before you guys start, though, I know we want to make sure that P&Z clocks in too.
You want me to call this meeting to order as well? Fantastic. All right. Well, we will go ahead and call the P&Z to order at, well, what is it, 5:02, give or take? Yeah, there we go. How about that? Is that good enough? Good. Rock and roll. Please.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, P&Z Board. I'm Jamie Schulte with P3 Works.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Friedman with Samco Capital Markets, financial advisor to the city.
So tonight we're going to give you a brief introduction to public improvement districts, commonly referred to as PIDs. So to start off, Chapter 372 is essentially our PID rulebook. It comes out of local government code statute, and it gives us all the legal and regulatory framework that governs the process. Some big picture things to consider. PIDs are not separate political subdivisions, so you as the council will act as essentially the PID board. Any major events happen in the PID will show up on one of your agendas, and you'll vote on those. The PID allows cities to extend public infrastructure without burdening existing taxpayers, and it also gives the city an opportunity to negotiate with developers on things like annexation, oversizing, amenities, development standards, stuff like that. And it grows the city's tax base with bringing in new development without obligating city TERS revenues. So in the end, the city will have more property tax income. They can also be used to forward the city's comprehensive plan, thoroughfare plan, parks plans, stuff like that. Okay, so why should you utilize a PID? They're an economic development incentive tool. They promote annexation. The city can use them in order to enforce development standards, design standards, anti-monotony standards for these new developments that are coming into the city. You can also add in private amenities like pools, playgrounds, fitness centers, trails, parks, things like that. And it's going to accelerate the construction of improvements described in the city's comprehensive plan and other plans. And then in addition to that, the city can require a cash contribution from the developer to fund city projects. Okay, so how does the PID work? PID is a contiguous area of land located in either the city limits or extraterritorial jurisdiction. If it's located in the ETJ, it will eventually be annexed in. Assessments are levied on the property within the PID based on the benefit received from the improvements. These assessments can be paid in full or paid in annual installments. We usually see these paid in annual installments, but every now and then we do have people that pay their assessment in full. It's a lien that runs with the land, so when the developer sells to home builders, that lien will stay. When the home builders sell to homeowners, it will pass on to them and so on until it's paid off. And the assessments that get paid every year by the people who own the land, those go to either debt service on tax exempt bonds, or if the PID does not issue bonds, then it will go to pay off the reimbursement agreement with the developer, which does include interest. An important thing to note, administrative expenses are included in the annual installment. Those are already calculated in. That's how we get paid, so that the PID essentially pays us. That doesn't come out of city funds, so no concerns with that. And existing residents pay nothing, no city funds are used. All of that comes from that assessment.
One thing I might add to that, PID assessments are often thought of as a tax by another name. One key distinction to keep in mind, as your property value goes up, as the levy levies an ad valorem tax, the actual amount of property tax you may pay as a homeowner will change over time. A PID assessment is a fixed dollar amount that does not change over time. So even as the value of those homes goes up, even as they may change hands over time, that assessment is the same for the course of those 30 years or the length of that public improvement district.
Okay, and then the creation process for a PID. In order to create a PID, the developer has to submit a PID petition to the city council. That same PID petition will also call a public hearing. At a later date, the city council will hold the public hearing where anyone can have a chance to talk, and then you will consider and vote on the creation of the PID. Once the PID has been created, we prepare a service and assessment plan, PID finance agreements, et cetera. Service and assessment plan is our scope, and then that will come before the council as well, and you will approve that. If bonds get issued, that will follow. Public hearing to levy an assessment, that comes first, followed by bonds. Typically about a 6-month process, and then leading up to that levy of assessments, the city and developer will enter into a professional services agreement, which is essentially how we get paid until that assessment exists. So the developer will escrow funds to the city to give you guys money to pay us without affecting your city funds.
And if I might interject here, the reason this information is being presented tonight is we do have a developer that has demonstrated an interest in creating a PID. And we thought in order for council to make the best decision, we needed to be educated on what exactly is a PID, the good, the bad, the ugly, how does it benefit the city, could it hurt the city, be able to answer all of those questions before a definitive response could be made.
Okay, so who does the city have on their team in the PID process? Obviously, you have your city staff, city manager, secretary, finance director, engineer, attorney, and then your third-party consultants, PID administrator, that's me, financial advisor, and then when we issue bonds, you'd add in bond counsel, underwriter, appraiser, underwriter counsel, and trustee. So you'll have all of us on our side, and then the developer will have their team as well.
We've issued over the last couple of years some bonds or certificates of obligation for the wastewater treatment plant. A lot of the folks involved are the same between when the city of Paris issues debt versus issuing PID bonds. It follows a very similar process, but it's a far more complex and negotiated process, because when we borrow money as the city of Paris, we're pledging our ad valorem taxes most often. We're a known entity. We borrow at traditional tax exempt interest rates. Today, that's around 4%. PID bonds, whether we'll get into the types of PID financings that there are, or ways of securing a public improvement district, are much greater risk. And so there's a lot more effort and checks and balances that go into the process before the city issues those public improvement district bonds on behalf of a developer. And so you've got, on top of all of the staff time and engineers and consultants that are working, you've got a PID administrator who specializes in administering that PID, which is putting together that service and assessment plan that governs how those funds are expended toward the approved project that the city's negotiated. You've also got your bond lawyers, and you've got a third-party independent appraiser who's appraising not just the value of the land that they're going to develop, but the value with the improvements that they're setting forth to develop as part of that public improvement district: water and sewer lines, street, curb, gutter, et cetera. So there's more people involved. The borrowing cost of those financings is much greater because they represent a higher level of risk to the bond investor. It's always really important to remember that in no way and in no uncertain circumstance is the ad valorem taxes of the city pledged in repayment of any public improvement district bonds. The PID is an imaginary boundary written over a parcel of land, and so when a bond investor is buying PID bonds, they know they can only look to those assessments for repayment of that debt. So in no way can they come back to the city and say, you need to make this right, you need to go levy an INS tax, just as you do for your COs. There's cities under absolutely no obligation to do that, or any other revenue stream of the city or its other enterprises. I guess I'll take these slides. So there are different types of PIDs, and every development is different all over the state, but you could have multiple developments just within Paris that have different needs, and the type of financing that they may undergo, or the timeline for doing that would be different between the three. So we'll look at pay-as-you-go PIDs, and I would look at them as kind of one end of the spectrum, where they're going to levy an assessment, and the developer's going to receive that cash flow annually over the life of that PID. So if a homeowner's paying $1,500 a year, as an example of their PID assessment, the developer would expect to collect that $1,500 a year annually for the life of that PID. On the opposite end of that spectrum are construction bonds, and that's where PID bonds are issued before any improvements are made, any houses are built, there's any homeowner in place, and that's called the construction bond. That represents the highest level of risk for a bond investor, because you are lending money to somebody before any value has been put on the ground. And so there are lots of different metrics and different safeguards that go into place before the city might okay issuance of construction bonds or upfront bonds for a public improvement district. The quality of the home builders that they're bringing in, are they, a known entity such as a Lennar, D.R. Horton, some of the bigger names that you may think of. And so that level of perceived risk matters when you can go to market, whether you can even go to market. Investors do a lot of due diligence when it comes to construction bonds. That third type of PID is really kind of in the middle between those two prior options, are reimbursement bonds. And that's where you set up a PID, you establish and set that PID assessment, and then after the infrastructure has gone in the ground, whether that's water, sewer, street, curb, et cetera, and the lots are now being sold to developers, then you can go in and issue the bonds. The value's been put on the ground. The developer's probably done that through using a mixture of their own cash and or private debt or equity that they've raised, and then they're going to issue bonds once there's value on the ground that they can then, comes back to them to reimburse themselves for the money that they've expended toward the project. And that's taken a lot of risk off of the table. We see probably more of that these days, at least in my experience, than we are of construction bonds. But again, every development is different. And so it's hard to say with any degree of certainty, which one you might expect for any given development that the city examines. Turn that back over to you.
All right, so the city obligations for the PIDs. Number one, you guys are going to inspect the public improvements that the developer is putting in, make sure that they're up to standard before accepting them, things like that. And then hiring and overseeing the PID administrator, that's us. Some of the things that P3 will do for you as your PID administrator is review requests for draws from the developer. We have a specific draw team that specializes in this. The developer submits their cost to us. We review them, compare them against the SAP, make sure that the costs that they are wanting reimbursed align with what we approved in that document and are compliant with the PID. And then at that time, once those costs have been approved, we release the funds back to them. So we handle all of that. And then maintaining a database for all property within the PID. We have a website where anyone within the PID can go look up their property and see all the details of their assessment, their annual installment for the year, everything like that. And we update that every year around this time. Updating the assessment roll, allocate assessments upon subdivision, and track payment history. That all happens in that last bullet point, prepare and adopt an annual SAP update. Once the PID has been created, we will bring an SAP update before the council every year, which is going to update that assessment roll, which will tell people what their installment is for that exact year. That's also going to include budget updates, construction updates. It'll show how many lots have been sold to homeowners, how many are still being constructed, what percent of the budget has been spent, if there's been any plats recorded, all of that stuff. So once the PID's created, we do come back every year for the life of the PID, give you guys an update, give the people that live within the PID an update, let them know what they owe for that year. So that we do that every summer. We're in that process right now. Throughout the year, we prepare delinquency reports. And then for bonded PIDs, the developer is going to enter into a continuing disclosure agreement, which is going to require them to submit a quarterly report as well as an annual report. And we have a team that reviews those, verifies the information in them, make sure everything is correct and accurate, and make sure that they're staying in compliance with those agreements that they signed and what they promised the city they were going to do.
So kind of touched on this a moment ago, the financial implications for the city. You're not pledging your taxes or any other revenue stream. The PID debt is non-recourse to the city, meaning no one can ever come after you if a developer or if the PID bonds years down the road are in some form of default, which, by the way, has happened incredibly infrequently as PIDs have risen to more prominence here in Texas. But they're backed by those assessments and only those assessments. The issuance of any PID bonds has no effect on the city's ability to issue debt, the city's credit rating, and we go through this very often with Standard & Poor's and the other rating agencies. They don't view public improvement district debt issued by a city as part of the city's debt because they recognize that it's non-recourse to the city. And then along with that, the city keeps all of its ad valorem taxes and sales tax revenues. You're not giving anything up. The punchline of really how PIDs have risen to prominence, especially in the last 5 and 10 years, is it allows for development and incentivizes development to happen without putting the cost of that infrastructure on existing taxpayers. And so this is that mechanism to have streets and public works that will eventually be owned, maintained by the city, but the cost of that infrastructure paid by the homeowners who are directly benefiting from it. And so this really has successfully accomplished that goal the state over. And there's more nuance, different types of things that developers are approaching cities with in addition to PIDs. Not going to talk about that tonight because the request before you all at this point doesn't include any of those. The one thing that's worth noting is this last bullet point on the left. It counts against your bank qualified limit. When we borrowed over the last few years, because we borrowed larger amounts of money, this hasn't been an issue. When the city borrows less than $10 million in a calendar year, we can designate our bonds as qualified tax exempt obligations. It helps us to get the absolute lowest borrowing cost when we access the capital markets. The issuance of any PID bonds counts against the city's $10 million annual limit in a calendar year. We've kind of covered that hurdle within the financing agreements of PIDs. It says, Mr. Developer, if your PID issuance causes the city to have to issue its debt on a non-bank qualified basis, we will calculate how much interest we are paying, and you will cut us a check at the time of our bond sale to make the city whole, should we intend to borrow less than $10 million in a calendar year. So, and again, the cost of going through a PID, we're incentivizing a developer as a city to come in to build these homes, to help them achieve a lower cost of financing, because it's important to keep in mind why developers asking for a PID creation here. It's so that they can access cheaper money than they would on their own. If they would access the private capital markets or equity, they might expect to pay anywhere from 10, 12 or greater percent. They can borrow for this infrastructure somewhere around the 7% range on tax exempt money. That makes a huge impact on their bottom line. And so you're bringing that to the table. The city shouldn't be coming out of pocket in order to do so. So the costs of paying your advisors and the various consultants are all borne by the developer. And that's back to that professional services agreement that we have the developers fund. When the bonds are issued, all the financial advisor, bond counsel, all of the different folks involved are paid out of that bond issuance and that professional services agreement escrow account that's created from the outset, so the city's not coming out of pocket $1 to negotiate and ultimately see the public improvement district created and successfully implemented.
Yeah, so some of the benefits and challenges of PIDs. Benefits, as mentioned, annexation, increased tax base, enhanced projects and amenities, advancing city master plans. You guys have a lot of control to say what you want in the situation, what the city needs. You can really prioritize that when you're negotiating your PID, and then the cash contribution to the city. Some potential challenges that we see working with PIDs: public perception and headline risk. Not everyone is super educated on PIDs, so there do arise some issues with that. Another issue when you're issuing bonds, obviously there's market risk when it comes to that, investors, things like that. Administrative burden, your city staff will have to put in more work than usual with the addition of a PID on their plate as well, especially during that creation process, and then the covenant to foreclose as well.
Yeah, I would add the public perception and headline risk, really two of the same thing. You get folks who, when we sell these bonds, when the city sells these bonds, taxes and revenues aren't pledged, it still says City of Paris, Texas, Special Assessment Revenue Bond. So it appears like you're issuing debt as a concerned citizen. Say, why are we paying for development? Well, the reality of that is that we, the City of Paris, and our ad valorem taxpayers and our utility rate payers aren't paying for this, but there's a headline and a perception risk to that. Hopefully educate in instances like this to make people aware of what the mechanics and reality of a public improvement district are, but they certainly exist, especially to the uninitiated. As far as it goes with the marketing of the bonds risk, interest rate risk, that certainly exists. It's no different than when we, the City of Paris, are trying to construct a wastewater treatment plant in a rising interest rate environment. We've got inflation that's been running out of control. All of those same things exist. There are stopgaps in place to halt the issuance of PID bonds. If interest rates are so high, it's not going to be able to generate enough money for the developer to successfully implement the development. You don't issue the bonds. There's value to lien ratios and some other metrics that are put in place to ensure that they're not over leveraging the development or themselves and putting a potential headline risk, because the main headline risk would be City of Paris, Texas, special assessment bonds default. And that's what we all want to avoid. Even though there's no comeback on the city, those are the type of headline risks that you want to avoid, and having the right group of people, consultants, working on behalf of the city through this process is what helps to ensure that that doesn't happen. And there's a lot of different folks involved that don't want to see that happen and would rather pause a development than allow it to proceed before it's ready.
Okay, so some examples of PIDs. These are deals specifically that P3 and Samco have done together. Redden Farms and Westside Preserve in Midlothian. Westside's been around for about 1.5 years now, and they're getting really close to having homeowners in place. It's been really successful. Construction's come along well. We have Prairie View and Ennis. In Cattle Mills, we have Brushy Creek, Fox Landing, and Cattle Mills Crossing. These are all very new. We're still in the process of getting those wrapped up and then get to the point where construction can begin. But like I said, these are ones specifically that P3 and Samco have done together. The list is much longer than this for both of us.
Their list is longer for ones we've worked on together. These are kind of in the area. What I'll tell you is, P3, one of the probably the biggest player in terms of doing public improvement district administrative work. They're seeing development all over the state. Both of our firms and our specific practices work with cities all over the state of Texas. We saw PIDs really start taking off in the Dallas Metroplex first. They are now all over the state of Texas, especially where there's growth. And so you're seeing these used very, very often. Houston, Corpus, San Antonio, certainly Austin and the Golden Triangle, and a ton here in Dallas, or in the Dallas Metroplex, just west of y'all. So they've been an effective tool. The thing I would always encourage is to have the right people in place. It's not enough just to have an interested developer. It has to be a development that works for both what the city needs and wants and what is likely to have the highest chance of success in delivering that. So I think that's the presentation. Robert, I don't know if you wanted to make this conversational and question and answer, or how you wanted this to
I think
proceed.
if council has any specific questions, and this is an awful lot of information to get and digest in one setting, but I think if you have any immediate questions, if not, we definitely have P3 and Samco that we have frequent calls and visits with. We could follow up with them and get that information to you. But if you have something that's pressing tonight, I would urge you to ask it while they're here.
What is the life or term length of most PIDs?
30 years, generally speaking.
I personally don't have any questions tonight. Obviously, I know that there's an investor that's interested in this, and I'm sure that will be coming to our table soon. But absolutely, much like many of the other presentations, great job. Thank you for the information. And if anyone else has any other questions, we can. Continue.
The one thing that I did want to mention that we didn't necessarily, I think it's covered on one of the first slides, is a developer has, a couple of different options when it comes to how they successfully go about their development in terms of getting the water and sewer that they need. One is this public improvement district where they partner with the city in order to get the development that they want. If the city were uninterested, and this is in a specific instance where this development might be outside of the ETJ or in the ETJ, not inside the city limits, their alternatives then become to create their own municipal utility district. And so when we reference that a public improvement district is controlled by the city council exclusively, you all are steering that ship from start to finish. A municipal utility district is a separate governing body, a separate taxing entity. It's set up around the same boundaries of that property, and they levy an ad valorem tax not unlike your own that's used to not only maintain and operate whatever those facilities might be, whether it's water, sewer, but also the streets and other improvements. It also supports the debt service. A PID has a life of generally 30 years. When the term of that PID expires, it goes away. All of the assets within that PID, the streets, the water and sewer infrastructure, it's already owned by the city. A MUD, on the other hand, is owned by that MUD, and regardless of what anybody tells you, MUDs don't generally ever go away. They will continue to levy that tax. And so you've got another governing body out there making decisions that will run in perpetuity. And a lot of city councils the state over, would choose not to have, another entity out there where you don't have a say or any control. And so that's worth considering from the city's perspective of being able to drive the type of development that you want and also have a say in what those improvements would be, because certainly your police and fire will be responding to any needs within those communities that might be developed, and because I've seen this a couple of places where the streets aren't wide enough for a certain type of fire truck to get through when you've got cars parked on the street because there's not enough driveway space. So those are the type of decisions and input you all get to have as a city in how a neighborhood or how this development might proceed.
Actually, I have one quick question. On average, is there a statistic or any information on how large this boundary usually contains?
You may have an answer to this, but it varies by development. We've got some PIDs that are 1,500 acre master plan communities and some that run to the tens of acres. It all depends on the development itself.
Gotcha.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Please.
The funds that go to the infrastructure improvement, are they limited by the physical boundaries of the PID, or, and I don't, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, but let's say the city said, all right, this is a huge development, we're going to need an additional pump station or something that's not necessarily in that boundary but would serve that development. Would those funds apply there, or do they have to be within that boundary?
I'll let you take this, Jamie. It's a very nuanced question. Those would be considered off-site improvements and generally would not be included within the allowable cost of that PID. But then there's some more nuance you may want to get into.
Yeah, I would say there are situations where it can be. If the development would not occur without that pump station or whatever it would be, there are situations where the PID can pay for that. And then there's also talk with these developments of oversizing. If you're gonna make that bigger to serve more than just that development, the development can only pay for the portion of that improvement that serves it, and that's the same for the improvements within the PID too. If you wanna put in a bigger water line than what's needed in the main road for future development beyond that, the development will only specifically pay for itself for the portion that benefits those homes. That's also something that comes up in negotiations. Sometimes the city will pay for that oversizing, sometimes the developer will pay for that. That's a discussion that happens and is decided on very early in the process. So the answer is unfortunately sometimes, it's hard to give a direct answer for that one, but it's definitely a possibility.
It's
Something
better
that
than
we're
a
looking
no.
to.
And everything is subject to negotiation.
Yes.
Or most things are subject to negotiation.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but would that not be one of the items that would be placed into the development agreement between the city and the developer?
It most certainly would.
Correct.
So we would have a say whether or not that goes in and who would pay what or a portion of what?
Correct.
I have one question. How long does it take to usually get these negotiations figured out between cities and the planning and what everything looks like, what our street should look like? It seems,
That's as loaded a question. Maybe there is.
Okay.
We have some that are a few years along, and we're still negotiating a development agreement with a certain developer in a certain city. And sometimes it happens in a few short months. It depends a lot on the complexity of the project and the infrastructure and just the project itself. And sometimes it has to do with, some personalities that may be brought to the table and getting that done. But conceivably, it can happen as quickly as everybody can kind of come to terms on what they want, what they're willing to give up.
okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a civil engineer here in town, so I've done many subdivisions. And my question is, I'm not real familiar with PIDs, to be honest with you. And so, is this a way for a developer to help pay for specific infrastructure improvements, like he was saying, if you need additional sewer, water, whatever to serve that subdivision? Or is this a way for the developer to get the people buying those? It just affects the people in that area. So it's an added tax for a 30-year period or something that's added to that property. Is that right? Or
That is right.
because the reason I'm asking is like, the subdivision I'm familiar with, we develop a lot. That lot costs $85,000 to develop. When the homeowner buys it, they pay that $85,000, they buy their house, and they're done. So in this case, they're going to be paying for those improvements over a tax base over 30 years for that property. Is that correct?
That assessment would be fixed at whatever that assessment's placed on that lot. Let's say it's $1,500 a year. They could choose to pay all 30 years of that in any given year. They could pay it all up front, just as in kind of your more traditional example, but it's,
It's just when I first heard it, I thought, well, these people paying twice. They're buying a lot, and then they're paying for the improvements over 30 years.
in theory,
That's what it feels like.
the
to me.
improvements that are being put in the ground and financed wouldn't be factored into the cost of that lot
I
like
see
in
what
your
you're saying.
traditional
Right.
scenario.
Okay.
It should be.
Where it is on our side, the way we do
Sure,
it.
but it's all, these developers do a lot of math, what we call like a tax rate equivalent.
Sure.
Because they look at the PID assessment as though it were just another tax, and it might be 25 cents, as an example. They know that they still have to be able to market this home that they're going to build
Right.
against their competition, whether that's neighboring cities, other subdivisions within the city, other PIDs that are built within that city. And so they are very cognizant of the burden that they're putting on this prospective homeowner when they're coming up with that. And that is reflected in the price of the home that they're building, but also the level of assessments that are going.
And it
with
does travel with the lot, really. So
Correct. It travels with the
it's-
land.
right. Okay, that's all I've got. That answers my question.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 4, review information contained in the Paris housing market analysis with Catalyst Housing Consultant.
Mayor, if I would, by way of introduction, of course, we have Catalyst Housing Housing Consultants here with us. This project started over a year ago with there are 3 individuals, but 2 that are here with us tonight. Chris Branham and Don Work. They're going to present their assessment, the findings. Staff's been working closely with them, as have other stakeholders, to determine what is the inventory and audit of our housing, so we can determine the best way to move forward and the most appropriate way to move forward to make sure that our development is what Paris needs. So I'll give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Chris Branham from Catalyst Commercial, and this is my associate Don Warwick with Freeze & Nichols. We've been working on this for a while, going back and forth with staff, making some refinements with staff and EDC staff, city staff and EDC staff. And we're excited to present this. We appreciate you guys having us in this format so that we can talk about Paris and kind of what's happening in Paris and what's going to happen going forward. So, like Rob said, we started this last spring. Came out here, did kind of a city tour, met with some stakeholders, had kind of a presentation, and then we came back in the fall for the second phase where we came out and did some more kind of in-person assessment, driving around all the city streets, looking at all the housing for, making assessments on condition, and then went back to our offices in Oklahoma and DFW and did all our data analysis, and then came back here in April to present kind of initial findings to city and EDC staff, and then now we are back for council workshop, and then next would be adopting this as a policy document as an amendment to your comp plan. So kind of jumping in, where are we now? We started this process, and through the driving tours, we identified, a number of issues, lack of housing choice and inventory, lack of kind of that next level move up housing that, some of the new companies that are coming in with these higher paying jobs that Maureen is working so hard to recruit. There's.
Brandon?
Yes,
So
sir.
sorry. Do you mind speaking up?
Sure,
into the
sure,
mic?
sorry. Can everybody hear me now? Everybody hear me? All right, perfect. Sorry. So as these people come in, trying to give them, more choice of housing within the city of Paris. So a lot of times right now what we're seeing, some of that housing is going out into the county. And that's the choice that people have, is to go out into the county because it just doesn't exist within the city, right? Blight and code violations, we'll get into this a little bit later, but, falling down fences, structural issues, unmowed lawns or unkempt lawns, abandoned vehicles, things like that. Rental concentrations in some of these neighborhoods where you've got issues with absentee landlords and, maintenance issues. And then again, that construction in the county. But, Paris has relatively low land and housing costs comparative to, DFW. You guys are close enough to be able to go there, every once in a while, maybe once a month or whatever for, amenities and, shopping and all that. But you're able to, be here and enjoy that lower cost of living. Relatively. You have a, diverse housing stock, you've got all your historic district, your downtown. It's something, a lot of cities don't have, and, it needs to be preserved and protected. One thing that we've heard over and over is an extremely strong rental market where, things are going on the market one day and they're gone that day or the next, just due to lack of inventory and, more demand than there is supply. Dawn?
So part of our analysis included really mapping the community and dividing it up into what we're referring to as neighborhood units. So these neighborhood units that you see on the screen, they represent areas within the community that have generally similar characteristics with regard to the residential development. These are not based on like council districts, but we chose to draw the lines based more on census block units, census block boundaries. The reason there is so that we could find the demographics and really identify similar demographics for each of these geographic areas, and compare that to both the city as a whole and to larger geographies like the state. So it just helped with the analysis to create this grouping of 8 neighborhood units. And later in the presentation, we'll talk about some of the key takeaways, things that we learned within each of these 8 neighborhood units, and we'll kind of start on the far west side and work our way clockwise through the different neighborhood units when we start through that description. One of the things Chris mentioned, that there was a driving tour. We spent a couple of days driving the community, really understanding what was going on within the residential areas of each of these neighborhood units. So this was a bit of a windshield survey, and looking through the, taking in the various characteristics of the different neighborhoods. We created this graphic, this inventory, to understand kind of what we're calling an assessment of the residential properties throughout the community. The areas that are white on this map are areas that don't have large concentrations of residential development. There may be some, so there are like large agricultural properties, but they're not like concentrated subdivisions and other neighborhood type development. You'll notice that areas that are identified in green are ones that we're identifying as sound. So those are areas that have few or none recognizable issues with regard to property maintenance or code enforcement type issues. Those areas that are identified in blue are areas that probably need to some, and this is a generalization across those areas, but there are properties within those areas designated in blue that need some minor repairs. There may be some, shingles or other types of elements on properties that need to be improved. Areas that are in red are areas that need greater attention. They probably need a heavier hand with regard to code enforcement, and there may be some things that are happening within those neighborhoods, within those properties, that might need some additional supportive assistance in order to remediate or rehabilitate properties as to the satisfaction of kind of what's happening outside of those areas. But we looked at things like the quality of the infrastructure serving various developments, maintenance of the properties as well as the structures, vacancy rates, and how close those residential areas are to commercial activities. So those may be neighborhood serving commercial activities that are desirable near residential areas. And then, as mentioned, the code compliance question, really property maintenance types of issues that impact the quality of housing.
So kind of getting into some of the demographics, one of the, things we recognize that there's been kind of a very flat line of growth or population within Paris. It hasn't really grown since 1970, so you're kind of on a steady pace here. But the good news is, your incomes are growing, and they are growing within the county as well. The population is aging, and those incomes, despite a lower median income than the county, you still have, pockets where, I believe 26% of the households within Paris make $75,000 or more annually, and then likewise 15% of Paris households make $100,000 or more. So there is that, there are those incomes that could support the higher level of housing. The inventory is just not there right now. So looking at kind of labor market, what we've heard is, some of these new companies coming in have, they have issues with finding places for their employees to live. We've heard anecdotally that, there's people that live in McKinney and commute into here, which is pretty wild. But apparently it does happen at a decent rate. But 70% of people that are employed within Paris live outside of the city limits, and then half of that 70% live outside of Lamar County and they're commuting in. And then on the flip side, over half of Paris residents that hold a job, their job is outside the city limits. So there's a big swap that goes on, every day. And, that contributes to traffic issues with, you guys have, it's all relative. It's all within, the context of Paris. But, when I lived in College Station, driving to Home Depot that was 10 minutes away was a lot, it was kind of well, let's do it on the weekend. But now, living in DFW, you can't get down the street in 10 minutes. So that it's all relative. So, and this is the big one. So, right, we're in kind of we had a dip post-COVID of interest rates, going down to a low of 2.65 in January. We're now, and it got up to 7.79 in October of last year, and now we're hovering right around 7. We'll see. Nobody really knows what's going to happen with rates. There's been talk for 12 months now. The Fed's indicating a rate cut, and then it kind of small rate cuts, but we don't know what's going to happen. But this seems to be kind of the new normal, the kind of the soft landing after the hype of the market in late 20 through kind of fall of 21. So there's a lack of inventory of existing homes. It's nationally, it's pushing buyers to kind of that to those new builds, because sometimes some of these larger master plan communities can offer more incentives to make the new builds cheaper than they would be to buy an existing home. But higher rates affect both the demand of housing and the supply, because these guys that are constructing neighborhoods, they're also feeling the hit of that increased cost of capital, just like a home buyer would. And then existing home buyers that maybe bought during that time period or refinanced during that time period, trying to move up to a little bit bigger house or trying to move up to a house with one more bedroom is just so costly compared to where they're at right now. It's kind of depressing inventory and movement within the housing market. So looking at kind of mortgage affordability on estimating some of these new jobs coming into Paris within the city and the ETJ, on a $60,000 income back in January of 21, you could pay with no down payment, assuming you're paying 30% of your gross on housing. It's a $372,000 house. That drops to $209 in October of last year. I mean, it just becomes, they're inversely related, right? So as interest rates increase, your affordability goes down. So it becomes difficult when we're kind of in this uncertain market right now. So then we looked at housing typology. So there was concern that one thing that was brought up was all the 5 and 5 development is all duplexes. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but what does Paris look like right now? Largely single family, just like any other city of your size. Pretty similar with the city of your age, where there's housing built of all decades. This isn't Princeton, where everything's been built in the last 4 years. Went from 1,000 people to a ton. So you have a wide range of housing types. You have a wide range of housing prices. We'll get into a little bit of that in the attainable housing here in a minute.
So part of the quantitative analysis we did was looking at historical development activity within the city. And so basically averaged over the last several years, the city's been producing about 64 dwelling units per year, where the demand for that, for housing, is really more at 300 dwelling units per year. You could absorb that many housing units based upon the current demand. So there's a big disconnect between what's coming through your development pipeline and what the community really could absorb with regard to new housing units. Of those 300 units, 162 of them would likely go to renter occupied, with 91 of those 162 being market rate. And then 138 of those 300 units would be geared towards or could be absorbed by owner occupied properties, with 72 of those being market rate at 200,000, at a sales price of 200,000 and above, and even above that, 36 of those, really of those 72, could be absorbed at a rate of 250,000 for sales price and above. So you have an opportunity to, if possible, increase the amount of production of your housing products and gear them more towards this market that is identified as demand for the next several years. Looking back a little bit at activity really since the early 1980s, which is when you probably had your biggest boom in development activity, relatively speaking, in the past relative few decades. That was the height of development. You had a lot of activity, and you'll see on the chart on the top right, the navy bottom color is single-family units. The lighter blue color are duplexes. The yellow is triplex or quadplex, and then the red indicate multifamily. So you can see sort of there was a broader mix of housing types that were being developed in those earlier decades. That sort of fluctuated a little bit, and it's cyclical to some degree, but then you can see everything kind of tanked around 2008, 2009. We all know that was the recession and the housing bust. It's taken the city a while to start moving the needle back up in the production of housing units over the past couple of decades, and so now you're starting to see some more production, but we're also starting to see that it's almost flipped. It's inverted, the amount of duplexes versus the amount of single-family homes that are coming through your development pipeline. So there are probably some unique circumstances that are driving that, but what we know is that what's coming through the development pipeline is not addressing the demand, and so we want to find the right interventions to sort of realign what's coming through the pipeline with what the demand is, so that it's better addressing the needs of the community. So that's what that is to address. And so all of those numerical assessments are really the quantitative analysis that we've done to understand existing conditions. Then looking at the neighborhood units, which is what I'm going to go through next, was more of a qualitative assessment of what's happening within the different geographies of the city. So I'm not going to read through all of the demographic snapshots for each of these. You guys have those in your document, but I'll just briefly talk about a few key takeaways from each of these neighborhood units that we've identified. So starting with neighborhood unit number 1, this is the far western edge of the city. The residential within this neighborhood unit is generally clustered north and south of Bonham Street, and also further to the north, you have larger lots that are more agricultural, and of course the lake up in that area to the far north. There are 3 senior living communities within unit number 1. There are some newer subdivisions on the south side of Bonham and along 41st Street. There's very little of what we would call middle housing, and those middle housing units are generally everything that you would see from a duplex to maybe a 16 unit, not a massive multifamily development, but something that's in what we would consider the middle. And what we're finding, nationwide, middle housing is at a complete loss. A lot of development regulations for communities across the country basically disallowed middle housing for a very long period of time. We had a period of adopting development regulations in the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s that were really focused on single-family suburban type of development and really disincentivized the development of middle housing, which was much more common post-World War II. So moving over to neighborhood unit number 2, this is further east and also north of Bonham. The residential in the southern portion of this neighborhood unit is more common, and then transitions to some industrial development and agricultural kind of on the western side, north and western side of the neighborhood unit. This is the neighborhood unit that has the lowest residential population within the city, and mobile homes comprise 9% of the housing stock within neighborhood unit number 2. So this neighborhood unit actually has the lower or lowest home valuation and median income for the city. Neighborhood unit number 3, this is just northeast of the historic downtown of the city. There's a wider variety of housing stock within this area that includes not only single family, but some multifamily and duplexes. There, in fact, are several duplex subdivisions in this neighborhood unit. We did recognize some code enforcement issues here relative to dilapidated structures, some unmowed yards, outside storage and junked vehicles. Mainly on single lots, so those are like single lot property maintenance type issues. There's a large percentage of middle housing, relatively speaking, in this neighborhood unit, and that's comprised of smaller units, 3 to 4 unit structures, as well as 5 to 9 unit structures. There are 2 large multifamily complexes in neighborhood unit number 3. And moving over to neighborhood unit number 4, there in this location, this is probably the smallest geography of any of the neighborhood units. There's a more pronounced mix of housing units here, or housing types here. Several duplex and quadplex rental developments, as well as larger multifamily developments. A lot of the multifamily in this particular geography was developed in the later part of the 20th century and represent your typical garden-style apartments. 2 of the large apartment complexes in the city, Greenbrier and Bellcrest, are located in this neighborhood unit. This has the largest percentage of middle housing and the lowest share of single-family housing with regard to comparing the various neighborhood units. And in this particular neighborhood unit, more than 97% of the homes are valued at less than $200,000. So it has some of the lower home values within the community. Neighborhood unit number 5, this is the northeastern portion of the city. Most of the homes are larger homes on large acreages, so at least half-acre or larger lots. They're traditional suburban-style homes, as well as some that are agricultural. These are well-maintained. Very few code enforcement issues were identified in this neighborhood unit, and this neighborhood unit has the highest percentage of owner-occupied homes within the community. Neighborhood unit number 6 is the southeast quadrant of the city. Most of the housing within this quadrant, within this neighborhood unit, was built between the 1970s and the 2000s. Again, limited code enforcement issues were identified. This neighborhood unit has the highest median household income and the highest median home value within the city. More than 70% of the housing within this neighborhood unit is single family. There are a few apartment complexes, Gardens Apartments, Harmony Apartments, and Spanish Oaks are located in here, as well as an affordable senior community. This is also the neighborhood unit that is where the site is planned for the Forest Brook development, which would bring additional single-family homes in the first phase of the project to the market. In neighborhood unit number 7, again, this is got quite a few single-family residential homes. This is the location of Paris Junior College campus. So we see in this location traditional mid-century suburban residential housing stock. There are some of the older homes within the city are located within this neighborhood unit, with the median build year for residential homes at 1967. So some of the older housing stock that's available. quite a few rentals aimed towards students. So with that, some multifamily. Let's see. And then moving into the last neighborhood unit, number 8. This is south of downtown. Many homes are within the downtown historic district. In this location, we noticed some varying states of upkeep with regard to both buildings as well as property maintenance issues. Some of the buildings, some of the homes are very well preserved and even have historic designations. Others are falling into a state of disrepair, so it's a mix. Let's see, so there is a fairly low median household income identified in this neighborhood unit, and this neighborhood unit identifies as having the lowest percentage of owner-occupied housing within the community. There's a large share of middle housing, so these were properties that sort of built up early on in the community's history, and therefore it tended to have more of a mix of different housing types. But about half of the structures in this neighborhood unit were built prior to 1960. So with that, we're going to talk more about understanding all of the different analysis, how that feeds into recommendations relative to your existing housing.
So we've got a lot more detail in the actual report, but I'll give kind of a high level overview of kind of 3 to 5 recommendations for each of the chapters. The first chapter addresses existing housing, but addressing neighborhood health with a neighborhood revitalization program through the city, where the city can track some of these neighborhood health factors: vacancy, rental concentration, commercial adjacency, code violations, et cetera. But then, looking at involving the actual residents within that neighborhood. One example that we gave was Plano's Love Where You Live. They've got probably, out of all of DFW, they've got probably the most robust neighborhood program where they're, involving the citizens to have these community events to get together and help their neighbors with cleanup, or if they're elderly and don't can't physically fix something or move something or fix a fence, they get together and the city provides some tools and things to help support those events, and it's been really successful. But they do like a neighborhood block party. They've got this trailer that's a pop-up block party thing where they've got all the stuff to, drag it to the neighborhood, and everybody comes out and has a block party. But, the kind of organization of those residents has been really crucial to the health of those neighborhoods. And you see that these people really take pride in their neighborhood, and, it's grown quite a bit. And Texarkana kind of does something similar. They actually have like a kind of a toolkit or a guide that they published that I could share with staff here. But they, it's how to set up a neighborhood organization. How do you conduct a neighborhood meeting? How do you, put together a work day? How do you put together, a block party or some sort of neighborhood gathering? But they also, have a trailer that has tools in it, similar to Plano, where you can pull it to the neighborhood, and you can, you've got rakes and all kinds of stuff in there. You rent it for, a day or two or whatever on your, your neighborhood cleanup day. But another recommendation we looked at, currently Paris has a rental registration program within the historic district. We talked about expanding that to the city limits to address some of those, life safety and maintenance issues, particularly that we've heard with absentee landlords, but getting some of that addressed. And because of the lack of inventory of rental property within Paris, and there's so much more demand than there is supply, we've heard of people talking about, well, I don't feel comfortable bringing up XYZ maintenance issue, because if I get kicked out of here, I can't afford to can't find another place, let alone afford it. So I think that's an issue that could be somewhat addressed with that. And then the third thing is a short-term rental program. Frisco does a really good job. It was a pretty good analog for this, but right now, Paris doesn't see a whole lot of, this is mostly like Airbnb, VRBO type things. So right now, they've estimated maybe 24 that are in the city, but only 2 of those are paying hotel occupancy tax that they should be. So the city's missing out on that revenue. You know, they don't know where these are at right now. They're not too much of a nuisance, but you know, the city should make sure that they understand where those are. So, you know, if you are having issues, you have kind of a better conduit to the property owner. So then we get into kind of the second chapter of 3 in the report. So attainable housing or workforce housing. So right now, 58% of Paris households can't afford new market rate housing. When we say market rate, we're assuming 200,000 plus. The reality is it's probably 250, 275 now with you know, the cost of capital and the cost of construction, unfortunately. But you know, 65% of the renter occupied demand is for below market housing. Right now, you know, how is that being addressed in Paris? With the public housing units, the Paris Housing Authority has or owns. You've got just under 300 housing vouchers, 620 multi-units, you know, with rents below 1,000, and then roughly 1,300 single-family units with rents below 1,000. And some of those may, you know, overlap, but assuming if they don't overlap at all, the need for, you know, attainable housing within Paris is around 6,000 households, and it's being satisfied by less than 2,500. So to me, that says, you know, a lot of these people are very cost burdened. You know, they may make an income where they probably should be spending, you know, less than $1,000 a month or less than $750 a month, and they're paying, you know, over half of their income to rent. So, you know, there's certainly a need, and there's a lot of cities that struggle with this, unfortunately, and there's no magic bullet. You know, we've got some recommendations that we think would make some difference, but the reality is that you know, housing is extremely expensive to build right now, and you know, trying to build to some number needs interventions or some sort of stopgap to whether that's the city, you know, working with the Paris Housing Authority to do more things like that. But there's certainly a gap, and it's got to be filled somehow. So we looked at the 5 and 5 program, and our thought was, you know, we worked with the city of Bryan and the city of Claremore, Oklahoma. Both have had these, both have done a pre-approved building plan program where they've got kind of a pattern zoning where, you know, somebody can come to planning or the community development department and say, I've got, you know, a lot this size, I'd like to build a house. And the benefit of this is one of the concerns with the 5 and 5 program that we had heard time and time again was quality. And you know, whether those housing units that are being built fit within the style, the context of the existing neighborhood. And you know, I think doing some sort of and Claremore does it really, really well. It's taken off, and you know, they're a little more affluent than Paris is, but not a whole lot, and it's gone really, really well for them, and those houses look really good. So you know, another thing would be avoiding bias towards one housing type within the 5 and 5 program. There's nothing wrong with the city saying we want to have this balance. This is the balance of housing that we're going to approve. We're going to approve so many single family within the 5 and 5 versus duplex versus multifamily. So then a second recommendation would be kind of creative solutions for funding some of this attainable housing, whether that's you know, 0% loans to to residents that qualify for, large systems issues like heating and cooling. And then looking at, rehab loans through the city that the city can use to help some of these people take their house from something that maybe having large structural or system issues and bringing it up to snuff so that they can continue to live in it and it doesn't get on the city's list to tear down. So then also the city is working on a policy for accessory dwelling units with kind of in combination with the whole lack of inventory or lack of supply for rental housing. The lot sale price within Paris isn't huge, but it's still a hurdle, right? And, if somebody has a large lot and a small house and they have extra room and want to, use one of these pre-approved building plans that, some of them can be built on the ground, they can be built on the top of a garage, they can be built, as another unit, but allowing people in certain areas to build those on their existing property. It just lowers the most of these recommendations are things that are trying to lower the barriers and ease any sort of barrier to development within the city. So allowing people more options to do with their property what they would like to do, I think is always a good thing. So this is, we talked about housing demand a little bit earlier, but essentially if you look at the region as a whole, how much the population is growing, how much the income, how is the income growing or declining? What does housing tenure look like? How long do people live in houses? How often do people change from when they turn over from one unit to another? Are they going renter to renter? Are they going renter to buyer? Are they going buyer to renter? So all that factors into understanding housing demand. And then from that kind of regional housing demand, we've assumed what Paris can capture of that demand. So like we said earlier, roughly half the housing is for market rate, half the housing is for less than market rate. So there's that gap there. But like I said earlier, the population in Paris is aging, and a lot of the demand, half the demand for owner occupied is for 65 plus residents. And you have some of those kind of age restricted developments that are satisfying some of that, but it's still a large demand. So then we looked at, so that was owner occupied, and this would be, renter occupied, and that's, kind of in the similar vein. The half the demand is for residents of 65 or older. 40% of it is for below market housing.
So we've looked at kind of identifying issues and opportunities with existing housing, and just as a point of reference, the most affordable house that you could have within a community is an existing one. So finding ways for rehabilitation and improvements of existing structures is definitely something we want to emphasize. And then we talked more about attainable, which often really is focusing on areas that are already built within the community and infill opportunities so that you make use of existing infrastructure and utilities that are already in place without having to extend additional services. That's a cost-saving mechanism, and so it makes it more affordable to build in areas that already have some development activity going on and are already served by your municipal services. Then we also started looking at what happens to and what are the opportunities for growth in areas that are not already developed and don't already have homes that could be rehabilitated. So this is where we start talking about what are the opportunities for new development in areas that are identified on the city's future land use plan as residential, but currently are are underdeveloped or are vacant. So those are things that we wanted to take a look at. This map does not identify just vacant parcels, but it does start to identify parcels of a certain size that could accommodate additional growth. And that are within proximity to wet utilities. So those are 5 acres or less that are within 200 feet from water and sewer, or 5 acres and more that are within half mile of water and sewer. So we wanted to start just looking at those areas for opportunities for additional growth.
So then we looked at, what kind of recommendations should we have for new development. One thing that's been talked about and we think is worth investigating with the city, partnering with an engineering group to assess and understand, are impact fees something that Paris should do? You've got to engage an engineer to do an impact fee assessment and understand, how much of those impact fees, what does that all entail to implement those? Do we want that? Is that something that that the city should do? But consider the fiscal impacts of new development on the city services and systems. I'd hate to see, and we see it in a lot of communities that focus on growth just for growth's sake. Communities that will essentially give away the farm in tax revenue just to get the development. And I'd hate for Paris to fall in a trap where you continue to give it away and then 20 years down the line realize, hey, we don't have any tax revenue to pay for our streets and sewer and water, et cetera. But looking at impact fees and looking at fiscal impacts of new development as a part of approving new development, I think is very important. And certainly not all development is contributing to your tax revenue. You have churches, parks, civic buildings that produce nothing, but those are still a good thing for the community, right? So, there's nuance to it, and there's, different ways you need to look at it, but, looking at it and having an understanding of the fiscal impact of, new development is important. Something else that we essentially administer for the City of Farmers Branch that's worked really well there is this demo rebuild program where they're essentially foregoing tax revenue from lots for, I think they do it for 5 years. They'll give a cash grant up front to demo a house, and then on the back end, they give a rebate on taxes. That's something the city could do. It'd be even better or more incentive if you partner with the county to for them to contribute their piece. But this is an example of a before and after. It's quite a difference, but it's gone really well for them. And then another one kind of somewhat internally is having a housing committee forming a housing committee that is made up of, I think you'd want at least one from kind of each of these groups, whether that's city staff, EDC staff, or board members, the development community, residents, some sort of civic leadership that looks at, what's the Paris housing market looking like right now, reassessing your development standards, because those change, right? Like right now in master plan communities, people are favoring smaller lots in favor of more amenities. Density stays relatively the same, but more of that land is dedicated to kind of public or within as much public as it could be, but within the HOA's purview. But those may be 60-foot lots where previously, in your larger or kind of middle single-family zoning district, you wanted 75-foot lots. But the market may be, has shifted, and that's not really where the market is right now. So maybe, that's recommendations or things that committee could look at and make recommendations on. And then, the incomes as a community develops and, you improve livability and improve economic development and improve housing options with Paris, that all helps, improving incomes. The incomes from, new companies that Marine's bringing in, that may or may not live within the city of Paris, but hopefully one day they will. That just helps the city, and continue investing in, your sports tourism stuff with the pump track and bike race, and prioritizing infrastructure that in a place that would stimulate private investment. Continue to invest in your downtown. I mean, that's a jewel box that you should keep working on, keep investing on. Continue the relationship between the city and the EDC. That can really destroy any future development in cities that have a difficult relationship, have a very standoffish relationship. So, continuing that partnership, because it takes both. You can't, neither entity can do it on their own, right? So, and then lastly, this may be more of an EDC function, perhaps, but, surveying new companies that are coming in, surveying companies that already exist within Paris, to understand where are those employees living, why are they commuting from McKinney to Paris. Certainly we can, make assumptions. We know, anecdotally, a lot of reasons why some people may or may not want to do that, but, understanding what housing do they want, what housing would make them move to Paris, I think would be pretty enlightening.
So in the last recommendation that we are presenting is that you now have a set of data that informs decision-making relative to housing and neighborhoods within the community. And so we recommend adopting the executive summary and the implementation action plan from this study into your comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan is a guide for the growth and development of the community over a 20-year timeline generally. And so it's the right place to house these types of policies so that you have sort of a robust decision-making tool that is really speaking to not only the specific recommendations on housing, but then how that integrates with your future land use map and your long-range transportation planning components. So then adopting the entire study as an appendix, so we're recommending that it would be attachment G. I took a look at the organization of your existing comprehensive plan, and you have several sort of operating or supplemental plans that are attached as appendices. Keeps all of your policy documents in one place, and it kind of gives you the right tools for moving the community in the direction that the citizens have said this is their vision for growth and development. So this would involve, of course, the Planning Commission reviewing and making a recommendation relative to an amendment to the comprehensive plan and sending that forward to the City Council for final action.
So next steps, like Dawn discussed, is to adopt the plan. But I think if the city did three things and three things only, I think, focusing on the 5 and 5 program, clean it up, make a few modifications, get it back going. It was wildly successful before, and I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be going forward. Secondly, neighborhood revitalization of your existing neighborhoods is super important, and a lot of those people could use, any bit of help they can get. And then third, I think the city does a good job of this already, but, being kind of a concierge for development, right? And making all that information available, being a good conduit or a good liaison or facilitator of development, and being transparent and working with people to, make that development happen that the city wants and that fits the city's vision. So with that said, I really appreciate, all the city staff's input, all the EDC staff input, all the stakeholder input. It certainly wouldn't have happened or couldn't have happened without that. So I appreciate everybody taking time and giving, their wisdom and experience and opinions on this. So With that said, we're glad to stick around for any questions that anybody has, anything specific related to housing.
Anyone have any questions? I think, just a quick comment, this is great information and we really
I know it's a
appreciate.
lot.
It is a lot. It's a ton to digest, but I'm really happy that we finally concluded. I know some of our former council members back there that really worked hard and pushed this forward too. I know that they're happy that we finally reached this point today. And so, where can folks be able to review this information?
I was about to ask you that,
Okay.
if you can put it on your website.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, we'll work with Rob and get it.
We will.
We'll get it
We will
going.
disseminate this. We'll make it public. We'll put it on our website, hopefully by the, definitely by the end of next week, but we'll try to get it on tomorrow.
And if you want, I can leave my contact information, or we can put it on the website. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk about something or talk through something, I'm glad to set up a phone call and
We can
do
share a
that.
link.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Chairman? No questions?
All very good information, but I don't think we have, anybody have anything? I don't know.
Just one
Yes,
quick
sir.
question. In the development bar chart, the history of permits pulled in Paris, there's a spike in the 80s, but a level population growth. Do y'all see that spike in other comparable communities, or is that an outlier?
Yeah, no, that was kind of that time. That's all census building permit information, and that was pre-savings and loan crisis. But yeah, that was pretty common.
Excellent, appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. I know we've got some questions in the back, so if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn, so that way the public can have some time to digest and get some questions answered. All right, well, we will adjourn.
B and Z adjourn as well.
Okay, they're adjourned.